let's get started. We are going to line some molds. So we're not actually making any soap today. We're lining molds for soap. In my hot process 101 video I put up on YouTube from a Wet Soap Wednesday live months ago, I used some pipe molds, and I think you've seen me use pipe molds in quite a few, and I've recently started receiving lots of questions about how to line them and how to get the soap out of them. So that's what we're talking about today. We are going to talk about what to use, what not to use, tips and tricks for getting the soap out. These are, it's called ABS pipe, and I just got it at Home Depot, and then I cut them. You can have them cut them. You can also get a little pipe cutter tool, which is a clamp that you clamp onto the pipe, and then you twist and twist and twist and twist until it cuts it. And you can cut them to any length that you want to cut them to. You can also use PVC pipe for these. These are great for C-popping if you can put them in your oven, meaning if they fit. Mine don't. I cut mine to 18 inches long. This is a leftover piece I had, and I left it. It's about, I think it's 11 inches long. This is the one I use for the kaleidoscope pours because, yeah, it's 11.5 inches. Because of the length of the little stick you pull your design tool out with. Okay, the other thing I want to talk about is these caps. You can get all sorts of different caps for these pipes. Don't get the ones that are rounded. So if it's a rounded bottom, you're going to have a really hard time balancing it because it's going to be all a rounded bottom. You can, this one is a solid hard piece of ABS, and I really like it. It just fits over the bottom like that. They can be a little bit hard to pull off once we have the pipe fully lined, but I'll show you a little trick for that too. But these are my favorite because they fit on so easily, and you get a nice level bottom on your pipe. I also have these squishy rubber pipe caps. I don't like these as much, but they were the first ones that I found. These were not, I found that these are not always available at the hardware store. No idea why, but I have eventually found them. These are more expensive. I think these are like $10, $15 a piece, where these are like $3 a piece. And it's a nice flexible rubber, but they've got these ridges in them. You see those ridges? At first I thought maybe it's because it's screwed on or something. I don't know what they're for because I'm not a plumber pipe person, but you have to kind of push them down around those ridges. And a lot of the time, I just happen right now to get this perfectly flat. But what happens to me quite often is when I'm putting them on, I'm going to exaggerate this. You see how it's crooked? So my pipe sits cockeyed. So I don't like these as much, but I usually I'm just pushing the pipe against my stomach here, and I just kind of push and push and push, and they've gotten easier over the years because I've kind of broken them in. But they're not my favorite. Like, see, that's still cattywampus there. It's at a diagonal. But if that's what you got, that's what you got. And they will work. Okay. These are pipes. You can cut them any size. By the way, I chose 18 inches as the length to cut my pipes because freezer paper comes in 18-inch rolls. So everything's the same size, and I don't have to cut freezer paper. So let's talk freezer paper here. And we're going to talk parchment paper. I see a lot of people saying they use parchment paper. I'm just cutting off a piece of parchment paper here. I don't think you should be using parchment paper. There's nothing like wrong with it. Parchment paper is just a thin paper that is coated in silicone. So I went to, this is Reynolds Kitchen parchment paper. I'm sure the off-brand is made with the same stuff. I went to their website, double, triple check. They do line this with silicone. So it's suitable for soap. But if you are going to use parchment paper, you're going to have rumply edges all along your pipe. One, it's kind of thin and crinkly. I'm just spraying this with water to get it wet. We can even, I got a little bit of oil here. We'll rub some oil in there. So that's kind of what we've got in our soap mold, right? Of course, it's going to set up. Well, let's do the same thing here with a bit of some freezer paper. Freezer paper is a little bit thicker paper, and it is lined on one side. Oh, the shiny side? I don't think you can tell. That's the paper side, and that's the shiny side. Oh yeah, you can tell. Shiny, not shiny. This is plastic. It'll be fine against your soap. So I'm going to spray this side of our freezer paper, the shiny side. And this is why parchment paper is going to give you rumply soap. Can you see all the crinkles in the paper? I mean, this thing's awful. This is what your soap, the ends of your soap are gonna look like. They're gonna have all these creases and crumples in it. You see that? Yeah. Whereas our freezer paper, it is still smooth as can be. The back side's getting rumply because I had it sitting on water, but the plastic coated side stays nice and smooth. Okay, I'm gonna put this soggy mess aside. Now that we know why we want to use freezer paper, this is what I do to line a mold. I do line the bottom of them, and I just don't push too hard. You'll rip your paper. I'll probably rip this one. It's wet because my hands are wet. And then put a cap on it. Ta-da! Right? That's the easy part. Okay, then we have to talk about lining the inside of the mold. First, don't use too much of paper. So we don't need this big long sheet of paper. Also, this big long sheet of paper, this is the end of a roll. I never use the end of the roll to line a pipe because it holds its real tight shape way too much. I'm going to save this and line either a flat mold or use it for my bottoms. When I want to actually line the inside of a pipe, I'll get if I don't have a roll already open, we'll just grab a fresh roll here. And I only need, I guess I should have met, these are 3-inch pipes, by the way. And if you kind of go around the outside and overlap it a little bit, I guess we could measure it. I've never actually measured it. I just know to pull out about yay much. Let me grab my ruler and let's see how much that is. That is, it's probably about 14, 15 inches. Now, if I was lining my 18-inch pipe, I'd be ready to go to drop it in. But we're actually going to line the shorter one. So you can see this. I plop it in and then crease it so I can cut. And I probably would have used this as my bottom liner. Now the trick is, On this freshly pulled right off the top of the roll, this roll, the new roll, the liner sits in here pretty well, right? But if we do the same thing with that inside one, let's just plop this one in here, okay? This one holds the shape. I didn't do anything special to it. Even if I force this one to be the right size, got a bit of an overlap. I could have cut it a little bit shorter. And let's say I needed to fix the top, you know, so I'll give that a little bit of a crease. Just kind of trying to treat the paper the same way. See, it still circles back in. It still wants to be tight. You can try and flatten these out and everything, but again, I just don't use that end roll. But as you get closer in to the tighter roll of the roll of paper, you're gonna run into this more and more and more. So this is what I do. I take, this is just oil. This can also be your soap batter. And I'm just going to rub some on the edge right there. And then it gets a little fiddly here. Plop it in and guide it back open. And then I'm going to do the same thing at the top. I'm just putting a little bit of oil there and then smoothing the paper in. Now, all that does is it keeps the paper from curling in on itself. If the paper curls in on itself and then you pour soap into it, the soap might eventually, or the paper will eventually be pushed open by the soap, but you're going to end up with soap in between this flap and this side. And then your entire loaf is going to be just ruined. So I tried in the past just kind of holding it and kind of praying for the best and stuff. But you can see, even if I'm holding the top nice and flat, you end up with this curl inside your soap. So that's no good. For the longest time, also, I did not line my molds. And you don't have to line your molds. I now line my molds because I make so much soap and I started using the larger pipes. They no longer started fitting in my freezer. So if you do not want to line your molds, make sure they will all fit in your freezer, or you could put them in a cooler or any type of container that'll keep them nice and tight. Let your soap set up, freeze your molds, and then pull them out like the next day. And I just give them, I drop them, you said drop them from boob height, plop right down onto a piece of concrete, like the back porch or something, or the soap studio. And that'll just kind of loosen them from the pipe and they'll slide right out without any lining. But, you know, that's great if I'm making one 11-inch loaf and that's it. When I'm doing some production and I'm making 10 18-inch pipes, one, that's never going to fit in the freezer. That's a lot of waiting and it's just not real good for production. So if maybe you're doing the Soap Club Challenge, which they're doing the kaleidoscope pours, and a lot of people are using the column molds this month, that would work well. Don't line it, pop it in the freezer, and it'll just slide right out. But if you want to do more production runs, I highly recommend lining it. It's so much easier. It really does take like maybe 10 seconds once you get into it. You just cut everything. You know, I would cut a bunch of bottoms, pop all the caps on, cut a bunch of liners, do the little oil thing, pop them all in, and then there you go. So like 10 seconds per pipe. It's no big deal. Okay, now that we know how to line the molds so that we can get the soap in there, let's talk about how to get the dang soap out of the mold. as I mentioned, you can freeze them. Now, I was going to have my snazzy little video set up so I can play it for you. My sister and I are like pulling and tugging because I had this issue. I was at the very end of a roll. I didn't have a backup roll. I'm like, oh, it'll be fine. I've done this a million times. I know how to do a little oil trick. Yeah, no, it still opened up. And it was a mess. It was just a mess of soap sticking to this side of the liner between the pipe, and it was a mess. How I got it out was I popped it in the freezer. So it was just, I think there were just 2 pipes that we had a real big difficult time with, and I popped those in the freezer, and then I was able to kind of bang and push them out. But that's typically not what I experience. What I usually experience is a pipe with weight on it, and then to get this cap off, let's pretend this is the edge of my table. I typically have to, just because you can't see the edge of my table, I typically have to go bang, bang, bang. So if you look at what's going on here, edge of table, and just using it to bang the cap off. So that's the noise you're hearing here. And then that cap will come right off. If it was a rubber cap, these you can just kind of pry off without any issues. Once that's done, I can typically I put the pipe under my arm and I push. And when I push, the soap usually just comes right out. Good to go. If it doesn't, and for some reason, like I've had pipes after years of use warp a little bit, and then I'll retire them. But if I don't notice until I have soap in it, canned food. Canned food is great for this. You know why? Because it fits inside the soap mold. So I will put this down, put this, and then push, and the soap will pop right out. Canned food is your friend. And this is a standard 6-ounce can of pitted black large olives. And I don't know what their expiration date is, coming up soon. So expect to have some olive soap on a Wet Soap Wednesday live soon. But any can that has just under a 3-inch diameter will work. When I am cutting these, they are round, so make sure you have enough kind of brace around what you're cutting, or that you have just some good guides that'll help you with cutting them. And then finally, washing these suckers. This one, this short one, isn't an issue. I just use a sponge and I go through, and I can get, as you can see, my hand fits all the way through. So I usually just wash this out like normal. You do need to be careful with the edges. They can be sharp. If they are sharp and you're worried about that, you can file them down. These larger ones, I had thought about doing larger pipes just so they're like all my soap in one thing, but it just turned out not to be feasible. So I can get, I don't know if you can see in there. Hi. I can get my hand mostly in here. So that does work pretty well. Or you can also just get a big bottle brush and use a bottle brush to kind of clean in there. I kind of just like the soap in my hand though. One good tip though is when I make the soap, I will then put all of these after I push them out, because I usually unmold the same day with my go-to vegan palm-free recipe. So I'll make soap in the morning, unmold it in the evening, and then while my big soap pot, I let that soak overnight to kind of finish saponifying so it's easy to wash out. And then the next day I just fill it up with some water. I put the pipes in that big soap pot too. And I let them soak for about, I don't know, half hour to an hour, just, you know, whenever I come into the studio in the morning, fill the soap pot up with water so it can soak, plop all the pipes in there, and then later, before I wash it, flip them over and let them soak too. And then everything washes off so easy. I mean, I really haven't had any issues cleaning these, or, you know, some of the concerns with round soaps are that it just takes more time to deal with the dishes, the cutting, the curing, the stacking, all that stuff. And I really haven't found any issues with it, with just some of these basic things. One, lining a mold if you want to do more production work, or not lining it if you're just doing a one-off and can pop it in your freezer. These caps, these solid caps, have been a godsend. Realizing I could just put one piece of freezer paper and bam, cap it, and I'm good to go. I've never had them leak. Never, ever, ever. You don't have to do a bunch of plastic and a bunch of rubber bands and taping, and I just pop these caps on with a little bit of freezer paper, and we're good to go. One thing which we did learn in the kaleidoscope pour is if you have freezer paper lining your mold on the bottom, your little pull stick, this is pokey. And what I did by accident when I was showing you how you set it up was I just dropped it in. And you just drop it in like that onto a capped pipe that has freezer paper lining it. When you drop it in, it's gonna poke a hole into the bottom. So that one would have leaked. So I think we put some plastic wrap over it. I don't think I cut a new piece of freezer paper. So yeah, that's the only thing you need to worry about as far as leaking with just the freezer paper, is if you're doing a kaleidoscope pour, don't drop your tool in there and poke the bottom of your freezer paper. So yeah, those are all of my soapy tips for soaping with pipes. And oh, it was really good to see all your names. Thank you all so much for popping in. Yeah, so any other questions, drop them in the comments below. You can also pop over to the Facebook group. There's a lot of great soapers in there. We are all here to help you soap. We're all soapy friends. Also, be sure to check out the website. If you're new to soaping, the Ultimate Natural Soap Making course is now live up on the site. And for those of you that are huge fans of Ann George colorants, just like me, you will notice, launched just today, is the brand new Earth Song Masterclass Live. That is the last Ann George Soapy color kit out of her full collection. We are going to do that live class in November. You can also get all of the courses bundled into one access pass. I'm super excited about the class because we are going to make lots and lots of green soap. So there's color blending, hue shifts, color theory going on. It is going to be so much fun. I have for you. Thank you so much for soaping with me, or talking about soaping with me today. And until then, I'll see you next week. Happy soaping.